Well, Donald Trump has triggered a severe backlash on both sides of the political aisle by suggesting that Muslims should be banned from entering the United States, at least temporarily.
Trump argues that America, quote, has no choice.
Donald J. Trump is calling for a total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States until our country's representatives can figure out what the hell is going on. You have no choice.
We're joined now by presidential historian and author Doug Wead in Washington. Thank you so much for joining us. From a historical perspective, I mean, obviously Trump has fired up people on both sides of this argument, but have we ever seen anything like this before in America?
Never anything exactly like this, but history repeats itself over and over in various shades of gray, and we've seen some things that have come pretty close to this.
You know, I think his comments have a lot of people thinking about the Japanese internment camps during World War II. And he was actually asked about them earlier today. Let's listen to that, then I want to ask you a question.
Well, it's not unconstitutional keeping people out, frankly, and until we get a hold of what's going on, Joe. And then if you look at Franklin Roosevelt, a respected president, highly respected, take a look at presidential proclamations back a long time ago, 25-25, 25-26, and 25-27, what he was doing with Germans, Italians, and Japanese, because he had to do it. Because, look, we are at war with radical Islam. We are at war, Joe, whether we like it or not.
Donald. I agree with that.
Right.
But you certainly aren't proposing internment camps. I mean,
No,
you don't support what FDR did with internment camps,
I am not proposing that, and that's not what this. If you have to look at his presidential proclamations. It was tough stuff, but it wasn't internment. We're not talking about the Japanese internment camps. No, not at all.
Okay, so, you know, it has people thinking about the internment camps. It has people thinking about the denial of Jewish refugees during the war. And I'm wondering, you know, what lessons can we draw from those decisions of the past? Donald Trump says, look, we're at war, and sometimes when you're at war, this is what you have to do to protect yourself.
Well, religion really has been part of our immigration policy for good or bad, some really bad stories from the very beginning. I mean, the Baptist Huguenots were fleeing Catholic persecution when they formed their colonies. The Catholic colonies in the Carolinas were fleeing Protestant persecution. This has gone on and on. You mentioned the Jews were turned away from our shore while we celebrate Einstein and others who were able to come from Nazi Germany. Tens of thousands of Jews on ships were turned away from the United States because they were Jews, because of their religion. So this is not a new thing. And you mentioned Japan. There was a pseudo-religious element to the Japanese issue as well. They practiced a form of Shintoism that recognized Hirohito as God, a descendant of the sun. They had their kamikaze suicide pilots. But when Jimmy Carter came to power, we reviewed a lot of these policies and came to the conclusion they were wrong. We didn't get a Supreme Court ruling. But finally, under Ronald Reagan, the Civil Liberties Act in 1988, we gave reparations to those Japanese we had interned. It was really a very uneven policy, an unfair policy. 110,000 Japanese interned, mostly from California, some Oregon, some Arizona, Washington. But 100,000 Japanese Americans lived in Hawaii and were never interned. It was a very unfair and inadequate policy to address the problem. So there is some historical precedent. My personal opinion as a historian is this is more about Iowa than it is about any real policy.
Well, Donald Trump says, you know, this is what you have to do when you're being attacked. But was there anything beneficial from those decisions in the past?
We can't find any. I mean, you can't find an incident where an act of Japanese sabotage was prevented? The short answer is we don't know what would have happened if it had been handled differently. But I say again, this is about Iowa. His numbers, Trump's numbers, were falling. Cruz was ascending. Carson was bowing out after that excellent Sally Quinn interview. And this was about reassuring the Christians there. We've had 2 incidents in America that have gone unremarked upon, where a killer has pointed his gun at the head of his victims and said, "Are you a Christian?" Both in Columbine and then again in Roseburg, Oregon. You can imagine any other group of people how you'd feel if that happened. So 67% of the caucus goers in Iowa are Christians. They're feeling a little bit ignored and left out in this discussion, and that may be what Trump is trying to rally. This isn't a very a very realistic policy for Americans and for this country to adopt.
Doug, I know you said that this is really about Iowa, but America has a history of anti-Catholicism as well. How is that different than what's going on here today? Because when President Kennedy took office, that was a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, that was a very vibrant stream in American history. Shamefully, we can go back and read the speeches of many celebrated presidents. I don't want to be harassed in my inbox by naming them, but people can Google and they can read the speeches of great American presidents who spoke out against the papacy and against Catholicism. And there finally was a Supreme Court position or seat that we said was the Catholic seat, and every president would appoint one. Today, we have 6 Catholics sitting on the Supreme Court, so we have wiped that out. We had great immigration from Italy, from Ireland of Catholics, and at first there was great resistance. There was a political party as late as 1930, 24 know-nothings, which were essentially anti-Catholics, were elected to the U.S. Congress. So this is a part of our history we forget, and young people don't even know existed. We've been through these things before.
Yeah. You served as an advisor for President George H.W. Bush. How do you think the White House should handle this issue moving forward?
Well, they're not going to discriminate against Muslims when it comes to immigration, but I think they will be more thorough and more careful in granting citizenship and green cards based on what we've experienced, and they should be based on what we've experienced. Working in the White House, as you said, for George H.W. Bush, there was a big battle going on then between Jews trying to get out of the Soviet Union, who were under great persecution, and Christians who were being persecuted in the Soviet Union. The State Department was pulling its hair out trying to decide who could get to the front of the list. So religion has always played a part, whether we like to admit it or not, in the immigration process.
All right, presidential historian Doug Wead, thanks a lot.
Thank you.